story begins with Mason Petitz, a man who grew up without a clear sense of purpose, found himself doing what most people do, chasing desires that seemed universal, but it was all empty. Then, in a moment of rash decision-making, he enlisted in the military, aiming to become a special forces operative. Despite having only a year left in law school, Mason discovered a mission that brought him genuine happiness. He married Jenny, and together they welcomed their daughter, Casey. During a mission to eliminate a man named Venegas, Mason lost not only his life's purpose, but also his comrades. The tragedy shattered him, leaving the military, and became a lawyer, even though he hadn't completed law school. Now, in the present, Mason drops Casey off at school. She confides in him about a boy at her school who keeps trying to kiss her. Mason's protective instincts kick in, instructing her to punch him if he tries to kiss her again. At his office, Mason receives an unexpected visitor, Sebastian Earle, an old friend who controls Contracted Defense Initiatives, CDI. Sebastian offers Mason a job, providing security for disgraced journalist Claire Wellington. She's about to embark on an exclusive interview with Paldonia's President Venegas. Memories of Venegas flood Mason's mind, the man who was once their target before tragedy struck. Despite his reservations, Sebastian offers a substantial sum of money, tempting Mason to accept the assignment. Mason eventually agrees to Sebastian's offer. Returning home, he discovers that Jenny, his wife, has been summoned by Casey's school principal. Casey, their daughter, punched a boy who tried to kiss her. This incident further strains Mason and Jenny's already troubled marriage. When Mason told her about his mission, it upsets his wife, Jenny, who doesn't want their daughter, Casey, to live without a father, should something happen. Jenny, however, realizes that Mason's departure for the assignment may be precisely what he needs to repair himself and find happiness again. Mason meets journalist Claire Wellington, who will be interviewing Paldonia's President Venegas. At the airport, Claire briefs Mason on his role, to protect her at all costs. Upon landing, Venegas greets Claire with a kiss on the hand, while Mason undergoes extensive security checks. Surprisingly, Venegas is aware of Mason's background as a former armed forces operative. During their journey, the security car in front of them explodes on a bridge. Rebels ambush them, intent on assassinating Venegas. Mason, realizing it's a setup, refuses to assist, believing it's Venegas' own people behind the attack. He walks away, followed by Claire. They take refuge in the bush, where Claire rests. Venegas catches up with them. Mason contacts Sebastian for assistance, and Sebastian promises to send a chopper on their location. Venegas requests to use the phone, but Mason declines. In a tense moment, Venegas threatens Mason with arrest for being a foreign spy. Mason, undeterred, pulls out a gun and confronts Venegas. Claire steps in, persuading Mason to assist Venegas. Venegas calls his nephew George, who is surprised to learn that Venegas is still alive. Venegas knew his nephew was the mastermind behind the coup and assures him that he's still alive. Claire, however, is taken aback to discover that Venegas' own nephew, Jorge, is working with the rebels. Venegas explains that Jorge is being exploited because he's an imbecile. Venegas implores Mason to help protect his people, but Mason walks away, leaving Claire behind. Claire tries to convince Mason to assist Venegas so she can report everything, but Mason remains resolute in not aiding Venegas. As the chopper departs, Mason realizes it won't return to help them. Pursued by gunmen and under fire from the chopper, they find refuge near a fallen tree. Mason positions a sniper to take down the helicopter, while Claire records the chaos. They escape into the woods after the chopper crashes. Claire loses sight of Mason, but is confronted by gunmen. Hiding behind a tree, she silently waits. Unexpectedly, Mason appears and engages in combat with a rebel, ultimately choking him to death. Claire emerges from hiding just as Mason faces her. A rebel strikes Mason on the head, but Venegas arrives and shoots the rebel. Meanwhile, Jorge and his crew inspect the wrecked chopper. Colonel Jan Kohorst warns Jorge about his failure to assassinate Venegas, leading to further tension. Mason, Claire, and Venegas rest by the river. Claire learns about Mason's past expedition and the loss of his comrades. Venegas takes them to a village, introducing them to the village chief and his son-in-law. They decide to stay overnight. After showering, Venegas and Claire discuss the attempted assassination. Venegas believes corporations are behind it, exploiting Paldonia's land and mineral riches. Lanthanides, rare earth metals crucial for technology, have been discovered in Paldonia. Venegas' refusal to allow exploitation makes him a target. Filming the interview, Mason gradually realizes that Venegas isn't entirely evil. The next morning, he wakes Claire, urging her to get dressed as they prepare to leave. Claire hesitates, wanting to learn the complete tale of the Paldonian insurrection. Venegas enters the room, encouraging Mason to stay and discover the truth, hinting that he knows why Mason was assigned to protect Claire. Mason's call with Sebastian reveals that he's been assigned to dispatch a man to kill Venegas. Sebastian assumed Mason would willingly take revenge for the loss of his colleagues. Mason hangs up, then calls Jenny, expressing gratitude and affection. Mason takes out his gun. He approaches Venegas but refrains from shooting him in Claire's presence. Colonel Yan and his troops arrive, forcing the group to flee. Venegas notices rebels attacking the village and emerges from hiding. Claire persuades Mason to assist Venegas, knowing the colonel will harm villagers. Mason and Venegas escape, but Claire is apprehended. Unable to defeat Colonel Yan's rebels head-on, Mason and Venegas focus on saving Claire. They spend the night in a church, then seek help from Venegas' trusted acquaintance, Bobby. The next day, Mason meets Colonel Yan, while Venegas remains hidden. Guns drawn, they face off in a seemingly calm village. Claire is forced to her knees, and Colonel Yan threatens Mason's life unless he reveals Venegas' location. Mason pleads for Venegas to come out. Venegas emerges, surrounded by civilians. The trio escapes through a secret entrance. In the palace, they infiltrate Venegas' office where Jorge is. Claire records as Venegas warns Jorge that the rebels will dispose of him once they get what they want. Venegas offers to save Jorge, and the two embrace. General Martinez enters, and tensions rise. Venegas attempts a polite conversation with General Martinez, who suddenly shoots him. Mason shields Claire, while Venegas retaliates, shooting General Martinez. With the general dead, Mason helps Venegas up. Venegas reveals he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Their joy is short-lived as they discover Jorge, Venegas' nephew, has been shot. Venegas cradles Jorge, grief-stricken while his nephew dies in his arms. Paldonian troops storm in, rifles pointed at Venegas. He assures them he's not the enemy and wants to help his people. Colonel Yan's rebels approach, standing close behind the Paldonian soldiers. Venegas subtly signals toward the rebels, and the Polonian soldiers turn, exchanging fire. Mason, Claire, and Venegas shelter behind a desk. The palace erupts into war. Mason orders Venegas and Claire to go ahead while he stays to battle. Mason pinned to the ground. Mason realizes it was Colonel Yan, not Venegas, who killed his comrades. Struggling, Colonel Yan attempts to kill Mason, but Claire knocks him unconscious. Mason joins Venegas and the outnumbered Paldonian soldiers. He grabs a gun, opening fire on the insurgents. Claire and Venegas watch in astonishment. Sebastian and his men arrive, assisting in defeating the retreating rebels. The war ends, and Claire reveals the truth about Venegas and Paldonia to the world. The palace is repaired, and Venegas gets the chance to tell his story. The interview is broadcast worldwide. Venegas thanks Claire and Mason, especially Claire, for making the truth known. Mason returns home, warmly greeted by his wife and daughter. A surprise awaits. A large sum of money transferred to his bank account. Mason smiles, inviting his family to enjoy their time together. And so, Mason's journey comes full circle, from tragedy to redemption.